Thanks. So, in July of 1891, William Rainey Harper got on a ship and went to Berlin. He was tired out trying to build the University of Chicago, even though it didn't yet exist. He had exhausted himself, and his one way of relaxing, which was to bicycle along so slowly that his secretary would walk next to him taking dictation, had not succeeded in restoring him to health. So he went to Berlin, but he was incorrigible, and while he was in Berlin, he decided to get the university a library. And he found a bookstore, Calvary's bookstore, one of the great scholarly bookstores of Germany when Germany dominated world scholarship, a bookstore with an immense, unfathomable stock and one of the owners had died, the other one wanted to sell out. The place was a couple generations old, and they told him they had 300,000 books and 150,000 pamphlets, German dissertations, the entire fruit of German Wissenschaft. And they would sell it to him all at once, and he'd have one of the great libraries in the world. So he bought it. He, of course, didn't have a penny, but they agreed on a price of $45,000, an enormous price. Harper, in the great American spirit, took a ship back to America, asked John Rockefeller's brother for the money. He said no. So they held a dinner in Chicago for all the benefactors of the university, and Harper, who was also a Baptist minister, got up and basically said, "Oh Lord, how am I going to pay for all those books?" And the benefactors agreed to write checks. Harper himself, university presidents were cut of an interesting cloth in those days, actually promised to pay 1/9 of the total cost. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. The bookstore was kind of slow to send the books, and when they arrived, it turned out it wasn't 300,000 books and 150,000 pamphlets. It was less than 60,000 books and about 30,000 pamphlets. On the other hand, the panic of 1893 got in the way of the university's fundraising, and so they only came up with $28,000. And after many irate letters and threatened lawsuits, everybody agreed that the university would take fewer books and the bookstore would take less money, and everybody was happy. Now that's part of the founding legend of my alma mater at Chicago, it's the Berlin collection. This was how the university got its great library. But of course, the fact is it was a pretty small collection. It wasn't actually nearly as comprehensive as people said, and the pamphlets mostly were never read by anybody. As I know, because when I was a student there, nobody had ever opened most of the pamphlets. You still had to cut them if you wanted to read them yourself. And I think that's an important story for us. I mean, part of it is about American buccaneering. You know, we love Google the same way we love Harper, because just as Harper said, I'm going to put this university in the flats of Chicago and I'm going to give it a world library and be able to bring great scholars, he actually did. Google, amplifying that many times, has said, we're going to give the world this kind of library, and anybody who has internet access is going to be able to use it. On the other hand, just as what Harper actually did was rather different from what he claimed and what the university will still tell you if you go to their website, so what Google does is actually a little different from what they claim in their publicity or what they actually tell you. Much more complex, unfathomable, uneven creation. And finally, the real story was a little of how America got great research libraries was a little different. And although the Chicago story played a role, it was one of several big efforts in the late 19th century. Cornell's building a great library centered on history, which is actually a much more coherent collection than Chicago's, was another. And finally, when the Titanic went down and Harvard got access to the Widener money, it was Archibald Carey Coolidge, that great historian and buccaneer, who built the model scholarly library of the 20th century. I suppose the other project you have to think about is University Microfilms, is probably the other really transformative thing. So Chicago was one of several pioneer efforts. It was, in fact, not the one that proved to be decisive as a model for university library growth. It had a kind of propagandistic and inspiring function, and it did suggest that if you wanted to be a serious player in the new university game, you had to get a lot of books. I think that what's happening now is many resemblances with that. Google has pushed us all to see that we live in a world in which digital media are going to be central to any kind of scholarly effort. But it's often not going to be Google's actual product that is central to scholarship. In my own field, the transformative tool is actually the Munich Digital Library, which has completely transformed the way that you would study rare books printed in Europe in the late 15th and early 16th century. Completely different product, scholarly in its orientation, highly selective. Every book is reproduced at the highest possible level in color. All readers can download either the entire book or any page of the book, use them in PowerPoints, use them in research. You have to get permission, but actually not to pay a fee if you want to publish them. That's transformative, and there are many of these transformative enterprises everywhere from Virginia, which of course has been a pioneering institution, all the way around the world. And it's that mosaic of different enterprises which seem to me to be creating a new digital research environment rather than just Google. So one problem is that we tend to argue about Google, curse Google, complain about Google, and in fact, that's only one bit of the picture, and it's not even clear to me for scholars how central that's going to be, particularly if, like me, you're not the kind of scholar whose main work is hunting for information in thousands of sources, but are the kind of scholar who spends a lot of time looking at relatively few sources and wants to have the best ones in the best conditions pushed back to their historical origins. Digitization